Hello, I'm X Toycat, and today we have a first for an unreleased Minecraft feature because we got to see what the Warden looked like in its pre-development phases. That's right, the Warden has been in official development for about 18 months now, but long before that they were planning exactly how this thing could come to the game, and so over this weekend they have revealed not only concept art of how the Warden was meant to be when it was called the Stalker, but also some screenshots and even some gameplay of these now removed features. Today I wanted to share all of that with you to give you a picture of how the Warden was going to look in its early development versions, because my god is it fascinating. First of all, by the way, you can subscribe if you want to see more Minecraft news, but let me just quickly show you the Stalker concept art. That's right, the Warden was initially going to be called the Stalker, and this is what it was going to look like. This just looks like it's some concept art, and it looks like a relatively interesting mob. To me, the idea of having those ears that visually show when you've scared the Warden is an extra bit of fear to add to it, but I think the most terrifying thing about it is that they clarified that the idea was the middle of this mob, the big orange glow you can see in all three versions, with or without a face, which is, by the way, a terrifying thing to say about a Minecraft mob, but that little orange blur you see in the middle was also going to be an item that existed around the Deep Dark, as confirmed by KingBDogs in this tweet, and he said that you were going to be able to find this on totems. It was going to be a useful item that you wanted, and so sometimes, because the rest of the mob was so dark, you would try to reach it and accidentally alert the Stalker instead, which is a beautiful way to do something. It reminds me of the monster in Super Mario 64 that pretends to be a coin. Something pretending to be something really good, but then actually being your worst nightmare is a really good way to add a bit of horror to Minecraft. And by the way, it's not just a screenshot we saw of the Stalker prototype, we also actually have a prototype video of how these were going to look, and allow me to show you that now, because look at how the Stalker was meant to be. Obviously he's flying around in creative, so the horror of this thing following you and the noise of it all happening is kind of lost on us right here, but you can see just how ridiculous these guys looked when they were walking around, but then all of a sudden it turns horror because they can bend their bodies in the weirdest, most uncomfortable way to look a little bit like a spider crossed with something that can eat you from the inside. I do not like looking at these things in so many levels, and yeah, they're one of Minecraft's tallest mobs, even taller than the Enderman, has been clarified, and just looking at this right here, I do not like this in the slightest. This is just a reminder that the previous iterations of a lot of mobs were a lot worse than their current ones, but I think the Warden might take the cake for that. And by the way, it's not just the Warden, we're going to talk more about his previous designs, but it's not just the Warden who looked super weird before, but also the very concept of Skulk and the whole idea behind the Deep Dark was going to look different as well. The Deep Dark went through at least 5 different iterations that have been fully concept arted out and planned before they arrived at the current vibe, where it's this kind of blue sort of thing, and let me show you what some of those look like, because this is the original Deep Dark Skulk, according to the video from Mojang, The Secrets of How We're Making the Warden, and in this video they show that the catalyst almost was a rotten, crumbling rust block, and the way that it spread is it spread the rust everywhere. I feel like this must have been the earliest design, because 1.17 was the update where they're adding copper and adding these sorts of new mechanics, you know, the first time we ever had rust in Minecraft, so it made sense that there was a whole area where rust spread and it started to ruin things that way. However, rust isn't that scary, and I guess to really drive home that this is one of the most terrifying mobs for Minecraft, they also tried a few other things that went a little bit more traditional horror. Take, for example, this, the catalyst being a mesh of cracked bones and the whole biome being covered in these kind of weird bones and fangs coming out from the ground. This is something that's very Halloween, spooky horror sort of vibe, and I think this would be a good fit for Minecraft, but I also don't think it fits what, you know, KingBDogs has stated he's going for many times, which is this idea of a true scary mob that you're not meant to kill, that you're meant to be scared of. And so the next idea was going a bit more Eldritchian, where there's this very dark block that floats up smoke from it and kind of vanishes nothingness. He says that it says here the texture feels like some exposed opening where you see the veins or the textile material that holds everything together, but beyond that there's a pure dark evil void. And you can see from the way the black and the red is textured and the way this is all kind of coming together that this is much more of a I don't know, like Eldritchian horror. It's much more about this darkness that is kind of fun by itself, but I think this next one does a better job of communicating the same thing, because this was just pure pitch black. The idea was, what's the scariest thing in Minecraft? Darkness. And just like how the Stalker relied on darkness to work, maybe the same thing could have worked over here. The idea was to have some flies in the VFX, to have a rotten feeling, and just have a very unpleasant area that you went through specifically for, the items that were found within, and that everything else would be not so great to get there. And I think this is a fun idea. Also, the idea was, instead of it being a corruption, it was going to be a disease that makes holes in regular blocks until they're hollow, which sounds like like the game would effectively mine blocks rather than, kind of like corrupting them, which sounds really great by itself. I have to also mention, by the way, there is a fifth one. There are so many different concepts they went with for the Deep Dark, and these are just the ones that made it to the concept art stage, by the way. This is clearly a big part of the cave update that they had planned, because as you can see, this one has some triophobia in there, which is the fear of holes, to put things simply. There's something about clusters of holes that makes certain people's brains go very unpleasant. I know this recently it happened with the Mac Pro. I think you know what I'm talking about, Harrison. Like, it has loads of circles on it, and people get horrified by this. It's apparently a small thing that some people have a fear of. It's not an official diagnosis or anything, but some people just don't like it, and those people would not like this, which is a different way of doing horror, right? It's a very particular group of people that would be hurt by this, just like how cave spiders really activate my arachnophobia. I cannot deal with spiders, and some people cannot deal with small holes, and so this would be perfect for them. Honestly, I think the biggest flaw of this design is what King B Dogs posted on Twitter, this image right here of how it would look, and as you can see, even though the holes kind of almost work for the main sculpt blocks themselves, I feel like for the Catalyst and for the Shrieker and for every other block in there, I feel like they don't really look like what they're meant to. This almost looks like the scab dimension. Those look like, like it's a human body we're seeing super up close. Those are pores you're looking into, and these are like weird organs that we're seeing minor parts of, which might be fun in its own way, but I don't think it necessarily fits in the same way that the current sculpt does. I think that he also showed this version right here, another version of the sculpt that is nothing like the 5 we've seen so far, and this one does a really good job of feeling like a corruption, almost like the Terraria corruption is the closest thing I can call it to, and then he also shows us with a version of the Stalker from before that would have fit this sculpt, and yeah, this form of a deep dark biome would have also done something pretty interesting. These blocks look a little bit like gravel to my eye. They look like a metallic gravel that has a little bit of darkness to it, so it combines a lot of different things together. I think it looks like metallic vines when it's the sculpt veins, so that might be something that really works underground. Can't be sure right there, but I think it's the kind of the way the Stalker looks, where he would blend in pretty well probably, but I think it kind of ruins the vibe when he's outside of that biome, and I think the two things only work in that one place together, and I think you would have got a block set, a set of blocks that really do not do much good of a job outside of the biome they're in, whereas I feel like the sculpt set of blocks is very particular, but is going to work for some people. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe you think I've got that entirely in reverse. I think I've proven before many times on this channel, my idea of creativity and other people's idea of creativity is different, and I mentioned before, like, oh yeah, I think it's weird when people use trapdoors and they look like trapdoors, and people say, no, that's being creative when it's a trapdoor that looks like a trapdoor that we're pretending is something else, and I think that's actually true. So, maybe in the same way when you look at the Warden and the Stalker and the previous, iterations right here, you say this is actually really good. Speaking of things you might say are really good, you notice there how they tailored the Stalker, the Warden, to the Deep Dark. They actually tried this so many different ways, and I want to show you this. First of all, here is the current Warden, but they tried it with ears. As you can see, kind of looks funny, but then they also have a whole ton of different Warden designs, and I wanted to share some of those with you because just look at the sheer number of these that exist. Most of these are just in the image, but for instance, the Triophobia one, the hole-based fear one, is one of the most terrifying things to look at. Look at this thing. Whether it's day or night, I just do not like him. The way his mouth is set up is very unpleasant in my opinion. Speaking of things that are unpleasant, I'd like to also show you these ones in the bottom right here. You can see how they look so much like the Wither. They were clearly going for like a Wither style boss of some form, and then the bottom right is like, what if it was terrifying like the Nether? And then there's one that looks like the Lush Cave even, which again really shows that when this was in development, all of those features also were too, and it was gonna kind of tie in together. But if we look at the top left over here, you can see that all of these types of the Warden were scary too. A lot of them were going to float in some form, it seems, which I think could have really added some more to that horror as well. But I think its current form, I think looking at all these previous versions is a great way to show you that its current form actually does a good job. By being this huge lumbering machine, you do feel like you have some chance of avoiding it when you see him, and the fact that he spawns in the way he does means that you know that your biggest fear is not looking at him and seeing, oh god, look at those holes, look at that mouth, what is this thing? I'm looking looking at it again, and I shouldn't have done so. I look into his mouth, and I just see the void, and I know that's what I meant to do, but I cannot deal with this version. I don't have triophobia. I'm not scared of small holes. I'm scared of this guy. But you can see when you look at the current Warden, after looking at all of these different designs, that the current design really does a good job in balancing those things together. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Maybe a lot of you would agree that actually, no, the Warden should have been a rust-based monster, but I love that they're finally showing us some of these kind of lost to the, things that otherwise wouldn't have been uncovered, shedding some light on them. I think the real reason that that is so good is because a lot of people question why Minecraft updates take so long, and I do feel this sometimes. Sometimes it feels like it takes a full week to add a single Minecraft feature to the game, and you're like, but what happened with the rest of those 6 days? I totally feel that on some level, but for big features like the Warden, which have now taken close to 2 years, the reason it takes so long is not because they know exactly what to do and they're doing it, it's because they have to design what they're going to do, they have to create something that they know will be fun when they add it, and then they have to work out that fun thing. I think that there's 2 ways you can do game development, right? There's the hacky way, where you make something that works, and then you make it fun slowly by changing it, and then there's the version which Mojang is trying to do, which takes a lot more resources, but they design something they know would be a good balance for the game, they make sure they design it great on paper, and then they have the hard task of trying to make this very, very specific concept, but in Minecraft, in both Java and C++. I think that's the reason why they find it so much harder to, for instance, port code from Java to Bedrock. You have to redesign something designed in one language, make it work in another, while also dealing with all the spaghetti code. I think that's so much harder than just making something new from scratch, which is why we see so many fun Minecraft ideas just be a kind of incidental, accidental, additional thing. And so yeah, I feel as though it's really cool to see stuff like this with the Warden, but also I think it's a fun reminder that like having all these concept arts, all these different things, it's really fun and stuff. But I would love to see what happens if you're just like, yeah, how about every Minecraft developer just makes something in a week and then you keep the best ideas, rather than designing something by committee from scratch, you build to the top. But either way, I'm really happy to see what they've made here. I think that's also a valid way of doing things, and obviously we're going to maybe see one of Minecraft's most terrifying mobs as a result, so you can't really ever complain on any level. And also, I really loved seeing all of these development images. Again, really great to see the inside of Mojang, and I hope we see this more in the future. But for now, I hope you all enjoyed this little bit of a bonus video. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, subscribe. Good news, by the way, in case you're curious. If you're curious about my trip that got cancelled because I tested positive on the travel test, I did non-stop, rapid tests all week, and they showed negative, but you can't travel on a rapid test, at least not to where I'm going, which is Canada, by the way. So I had to go do a really weird type of test that wasn't a PCR, and so I did that, and I was negative. I am free to travel, and as you're watching this video, I am in Canada, or I'm detained somewhere. So either one of those sounds exciting to me, but I hope you all enjoyed this video. I hope that you're enjoying this as much as I'm enjoying Canada, because I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye.